Thank you, Amos. I'd like us to consider some one-word, one-phrase answers, responses, and you're going to have opportunity to just kind of shout them out, like as chaotic as you'd like, or something like that. But I have a question for you. What do you feel when you hear or see, however our abilities may be, what do you feel in response to the word transition? What do you feel when you hear or see the word transition? Let's go ahead. Just shout out a couple answers. One word, one phrase. What do you see? What do you feel? What was that?
Depends, maybe.
What was that?
Depends.
Depends. Yeah, depends, right? Yeah, depends. What's your gut level reaction just when you see the word? What's the first feeling? Possibility. Okay. What's that? Scared. Scared. Yes, yes. What else? Work? Did I hear work? Yeah, work. Work. Uncertainty. Yes. What's that?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Right? It's like that. Unavoidable. Right? Anxiety. Danger. Possibility. Anticipation. Okay, so notice, right, this mix, this influx of really positive, hopeful, exciting possibilities, woo, woo, and together with holy bananas, right? I'm watching my mouth this morning, all of you, okay? Listen, one day I was at the office. I was in the midst of, I just wrapped up a client meeting, and I went to check my voicemails that day. And the first voicemail I had, it was one from my boss, my regional manager. And I listened to it, and he says, "Hey, Drew, I'm so sorry I have to tell you like this. I was hoping to talk in person," he said. But I've decided to take another opportunity elsewhere," he said. And he was hoping to be able to take some time in the industry for my job, whatever. Typically, it's the type of industry where once you're leaving, you're immediately escorted out just for various reasons. So it's kind of normal, but he was hoping nonetheless, since he's kind of higher up, that he could stick around a little bit after announcing his upcoming departure. But alas, he was not allowed that indulgence. And he's like, "I'm sorry I have to tell you this way, but it's been a pleasure working with you, and sayonara, we'll never see you again," or something like that. And I tell you, you know what my gut level initial reaction was? Holy bananas, okay? It was, I loved this guy. He was the one who hired me. We had a great vibe. Our personalities worked really well together. He actually laughed at my jokes. It was incredible. But more important than anything else, he wasn't a micromanager. He just stayed out of my way, and his view was just to empower and support, and how you do your thing is up to you. Just get it done. And they stay out of the way, all right? Work whatever hours you want, do whatever you want. Just get it done. And so now all of a sudden I'm wondering, okay, on top of, oh, I'm going to miss this guy, is there going to be opportunity, because it involved a move to Illinois, am I going to see him again, am I going to get to say goodbye? But on top of that, honestly, even worse than that was, how is this going to change everything I do at work, right? Now, the good news is that about 3-4 months later, they found his replacement. And it turned out it was a great replacement. It was incredible. In some ways, it almost seemed like, if it was possible to say, like it was an even better fit almost than the other one was. Our personalities matched even better in a different sort of way. It was very different, but still matched really well. And he was even, if you could believe it, an even less of a micromanager. At the end of the day, I'm not sure either one was better, but I know I'm better at my job for having worked with both. I'm better for having had worked with the regional manager who hired me, and I'm even better now having the new one. Transition. change. It's a funny thing. We've all gone through and continue to go through times of transition, whether it's our individual personal lives, whether it's work stuff, whether it's finding our space as we navigate continually unfolding, changing, transitioning times in society at large. We know transition, we know it well, and that's why we have the incredible mix and array of gut level reactions to even seeing or hearing the word. Oftentimes it's relatively minor things, like there's a change, maybe with your work responsibilities. You got to shift, it's a little something different, a little bit of a transition period, but maybe not too bad. Sometimes it's deeply foundational transitions, deeply foundational things like taking action to present your exterior body, to bring your exterior body into better alignment with the reality of your deepest, truest self. Sometimes it changes everything in our experience of the world. Sometimes it's a breakup, sometimes it's a new boss, sometimes it's just trying to navigate life without an existential crisis, right? But within all transition, well, let me say this, life, it changes. It keeps going, it moves, it throws things our way. Sometimes we're leading the charge, oftentimes we're just trying to keep up. Sometimes it is really exciting stuff, other times it's less so. But it is that mix. And in each of these, we oftentimes feel that wide range of emotions, don't we? We feel anticipation, excitement, optimism, hope, along with times of anxiety, fear, and absolute terror. Oftentimes, it's sort of a clever mix of the two. Excitement for what's next, with a little bit of at least low-grade anxiety on what if it doesn't go the way I'd really like it to? And it's okay that we feel those things. That's part of being human. That's part of embracing our humanity and the fact that we don't know. And there are no promises for anything. Within all of this transition, yes, of course, every once in a while, the transition centers on our very own humanist community. Every once in a blue moon, or whatever the phrase might be, it might just maybe so center on the departure of two of our most dearly loved ministers, our leaders, our cornerstones. When Reverend David asked me to speak today, I knew this would be an important, pivotal day. Rev Kelly's farewell departure was just a few weeks ago. David's was last week, and last Sunday we shared a good goodbye with both of them on their last Sundays with us. Now, they both continued working throughout this entire week as they finished out the month and their terms of service well. And now here we are, this first Sunday without them. This first Sunday at the beginning of our next chapter. And it only makes sense that we're feeling a whole variety, a whole array of emotions today. It only makes sense that we do. And so I'd like for us to simply take some time this morning to discuss, to think through, to consider, to think our way through all of this. Some initial thoughts at the beginning of what will be quite a journey ahead, right? And I'd encourage each of us as we sit here today, as we find ourselves in this space, to just take a moment to recognize that mix of emotion, those mix of responses, neither of them bad. I'll be honest, sometimes we come into a space like this on a day such as today, and we feel like, put on the happy smile, everything's roses. And we might not feel all of that, and that's okay. If we can't be fully human in our humanist community, then what the hell is it called humanist for? So I'd encourage each of us just right now, let's just take a collective breath, shall we? Just take a moment and take it in. Just sit here and just a collective breath. Let's do another one. Everything I'd like to share this morning comes from a lifetime of experiences in ministerial transitions such as these. I'd invite you to raise your hand if you've ever been a part of a congregation in the midst of a ministerial or directorial search. Could be a humanist community, could be FUS, could be another just regular Christian church looking for a pastor. Raise your hand if you've ever been in a search like this before. Wow. I'm not quite counting, but it almost looks like it's more than half, maybe even more like 2/3. A lot of us. I too have gone through a number of searches. I joined my first search committee at the age of 17. Just a small little rural church, a couple hours north or so of here in Minnesota. As a minister, as a former minister myself, I've been on both sides of the search from the ministerial standpoint, both as the incoming minister, coming in with a mandate for change, as well as the outgoing minister. I've also seen a little bit of an interim minister. To be clear, I'm not here today to be anything other than to be here with you today. Reverend Dr. J. Exodus Hooper will be returning next week. Needed to do some traveling this week, somewhat spontaneous, I believe, and will be serving as what we call our summer minister, okay? Throughout, I believe, all of July and August. Our interim minister, an incredible human that I'm so excited about, Reverend Yulee. I believe if I have it right, I was on the board until a few weeks ago. Now I know nothing. Okay, I believe Rev Yulee is arriving at the beginning of August, but taking some time to settle in and just get to know folks. And I believe we'll start leading Sunday mornings in September, I believe. And Reverend Dr. J. Exodus Hooper will be leading us for July and August. I'm not the interim. I'm not the summer minister. I'm simply an old Baptist preacher who's just here to hang out and have some fun this morning, okay? But all this to say, I've seen a lot. We've seen a lot. But I've seen a lot of these searches through a lot of different lenses. I also led a nonprofit that worked with former religious leaders around the world on their transition out, as well as transitions to new things, right? I've seen lots of ministerial transition. And based on all of that experience, I can tell you this. We're going to be okay. FUS is going to be okay. In fact, I'm convinced that David and Kelli have set us up for an exciting chapter ahead, overflowing with unmatched opportunity. And that's not an overstatement. That's not an embellishment. I really do believe, with everything that I am, that David and Kelli have set us up for unmatched opportunity for an exciting new chapter. A new chapter. And not to say anything about how easy it'll be to upstage the last one, because it wouldn't be, and I'm not sure I'd consider it upstaging. Both different, both their own, but continuing on to the next. Not 3 steps backwards, but continuing forward into the fullness of our humanism. We're going to be better than just okay. FUS will be better than just okay. It is now time for us, each of us, you and me, each of us in this room and online, and those of us celebrating over at the Pride Festival, Pride Weekend, those of us doing other things, off at cabins, just enjoying our humanity. That's humanism too, okay? It is now time, though, for each of us to stand up and continue carrying this congregation we love so dearly much forward for the next leg of the journey, for the next chapter of our story, for the next phase of our expansion and development as humans and as humans in community. As we continue to dwell within the humanist call of building a better world and living out a healthier humanity together. You know what? The one ritual, the one constant ritual that we do every Sunday, every week, there's one. It's this: the lighting of the chalice. The lighting of this flame. As we gather, we light it. As we depart, we extinguish it. Now, yes, we talk regularly about how it represents the light of truth, the light of justice. But historically, it represents so many different things. That's two of many symbols of this. This flame, notice how when we're here, it's lit. When we're not, it's not. In many ways, it represents the flame, the fire of humanity joining in community. It represents the fire that we each carry with us and that we put together and build together here in this space. And like any good fire, it kind of flickers a little bit, right? If you look at it, it flickers a little bit. Even just this tiny little flame, it's not a huge bonfire, it's just a tiny little one. And yet it still flickers and moves and it expands and it contracts and then it pushes back out again. And it's over here and then it's over there, constantly moving, constantly shifting, constantly changing shape and size and volume. And it has an impact on the material in its presence, doesn't it? Flame, fire, is inherently transitional, inherently shifting and changing. It's a fire of transition. We bring and carry with us a fire. And this morning, I'd like us to consider that fire of transition, if you will. That fire of transition set before us. There's many things that we could talk about this morning. And I could have got up and let's just do a PowerPoint outline and boom, 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 boom. And you'd be like, oh, Drew, it's not even alliterated. What kind of former Baptist preacher are you? You know? And I thought about, well, what do we talk about this morning? As we set forward on this new chapter ahead of us? Right? What kinds of things? And I thought we could maybe take some time talking about expectations and the importance of the value, and this is true, the value of keeping our expectations open, because we each do come with a variety of previous experiences. Some transitions, like 2/3 of us raised hands about being in transitions, things like this, right? And some of those transitions have gone incredibly well. Some of them maybe not so much. And we carry with us, well, it went well because we did this, this, and that. Or it didn't go well because they did that, that, and this, right? And we have all these things. There's a value in just keeping our expectations open and just being community as we go through this process. We could also talk about, well, what do we do? What's our part in all of this? How do we take ownership into this next chapter? Thought about talking about that. I actually thought about talking about like 4 or 5 different types of things, which would have put this into an hour long, which I've preached for 90 minutes straight before, so I could do it. I'm not sure you could, okay? To be perfectly honest. So instead, I think we're just going to take a few minutes here as we continue to meander our way through, right? You can already tell, this isn't a charge kind of talk. It's a meandering. It's a finding our way through. It's a one step in front of the other. Where are we? And where do we go? It's not a super content-heavy few minutes. It's a grounding. At least that's what I hope. So I wonder if maybe what might be most helpful this Sunday is to simply consider our focus. What should our focus be in these days and weeks and months, the year ahead. The fire of focus, just staring into that blaze that is us. There's this fantastic quote, I suppose, that is probably no strange, unfamiliar quote to many of us. Things that matter most must never be at the mercy of things that matter least. We've heard this before. It's Goethe, okay? Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, right? The famous 18th, 19th century German poet, playwright, novelist, etc., etc. Things that matter most must never be at the mercy of things that matter least. What matters most? What might our focus be in these days, weeks, months, year ahead? When Rev Yulee arrives in August as our interim minister, I'm sure she will have all kinds of wisdom on how we as a congregation, and I'm sitting there with you, how we as a congregation and as a community can best support the search process for the new senior minister, executive director. I'm sure Rev Yulee will have all kinds of wisdom to share with us. That is her area of expertise, interim ministry. But in the meanwhile, though, and really all throughout the process, I think this will very much so apply, I would suggest potentially the best thing we can do is to keep our focus on simply being humanist community. If that is our focus, simply being humanist community together, then this group will continue to thrive and expand and grow in all sorts of ways, experience all sorts of new things in our development as humans and as humans in community. If we keep this focus simply being humanist community together, then this group will continue to thrive and expand with or without a senior minister at the helm every moment of every day. So, a focus on simply being humanist community together. I suppose we could break this out into two focuses, right? A focus on humanism, a focus on being healthy community, right? A focus on being community. Now, sometimes, and I hear that we all hear this a lot, well, what exactly does humanism mean, right? It can be such a complex thing. And sometimes I think we make it trickier than it really needs to be. How I like to define it, there's a couple different ways I like to define it. There's a longer version and a shorter version. I'll give you the shorter one, but both of them seem to be helpful as I work with different humanist communities around the country about our humanism. Real simple, really. Don't need to make it trickier or more complex than it needs to be. Building a better world while living out a healthier humanity together. That's humanism, folks. Building a better world, living out a healthier humanity together. That's it. Some folks like to add a lot of stuff about what you do or don't believe. Ultimately, building a better world, living out a healthier humanity together. That is humanism. I would encourage us, each of us, to spend these weeks and months ahead simply focused on how we can collectively, how we might together build a better world, how we might individually and together live out a healthier humanity. But then there's that word together that comes in there, right? Building a better world, living out a healthier humanity together. That word together, it leads us to this idea of community without us even asking for it, okay? Healthy humanity in community. Charles Vogel, he works with organizations, nonprofits around the country, well, around the world, in helping nonprofits. Many of them are congregational in setting. Most of them are not. okay? But helping nonprofits and different groups, different folks, helping them intentionally build genuine community, genuine intentional community. And he works with them to help them do this. And in his book, The Art of Community, this is something he has to say. He says, when we see that others are concerned about our own welfare, when we see or feel, experience that others are concerned about our own welfare, we then invest in building community with them more fully. We then invest in building community with them more fully. And we then feel more connected. We have communities in our lives. We each have many types of community. This can never can be. Some congregations try and make it and they always fail. This can never be the only source of community in your life. Okay? Charles goes on to say, he says, we have communities in our lives that don't have formal membership. We have communities in our lives that don't have formal membership, but to which we nonetheless feel connected. Why? Because of perceived mutual concern. Perceived mutual concern binds us more than anything else will. And then Charles goes on to list examples: the neighbors on your street or in your apartment building, your pickup sports friends, okay? I'm not a huge sports ball guy, but I think he's talking about just spontaneous games, okay? Even the people you know on your commute that you see every day. Community just happens out in the wild of life. How do we foster community here? How do we build beyond ourselves and into one another here, or wherever the here takes us as we make our way into the world? Not for marketing, not for numbers, not for dollars, but for the sake of sharing life together, the sake of living life together and not having to go it alone. How do we do this? Well, being a humanist community, our mission statement is this. Our mission statement, it centers on this idea. It centers on this idea of being a congregational humanist community that is doing three things. That is, one, fostering a space for knowledge and meaning. Fostering a space for knowledge and meaning, while also being a community that is striving for justice, while also being a community that is in service almost to three spheres: in service to one another, in service to the whole of the Twin Cities, in service to the world beyond all of this. Being a congregational humanist community that is fostering knowledge and meaning, striving for justice, and serving one another, the Twin Cities, and beyond. I wonder how this search and eventually the new leader, might empower us to do all of that more fully. How might this new chapter, this new search, the search itself, and the new leader the search eventually produces, I wonder how it might empower each of us to carry further and deeper into that mission in the world around us. We look back, we see an incredible decade of change. We see an incredible decade that in many ways David led us in. We see a decade where David shared just last week that the thing he's most proud of is the capital campaign. Not just because of buildings and materials and dollars, but because of how this space and that campaign has empowered and equipped us, we the people, to live out a more effective mission. Creating a space to foster knowledge and meaning, to strive for justice, to serve one another, the Twin Cities and beyond. We've seen how over this past decade, how we've seen our social justice work just step up in a whole new way. We might recall how when early on in that decade, social justice work was led by an incredibly powerful volunteer. And when they said, okay, time for me to retire this part of my volunteering, David said, okay, let's hire a staff person, let's hire a paid minister to really upgrade what we devote to the seeking out of justice. And he hired Kelli to be that social media director, social justice director and minister. We've seen the use of technology be used in order to bring our work, our message, our hope, our humanist partnership, to bring our community out into the world. And now we have members of our humanist community who are in Chicago and northern Minnesota and kind of all over the place. Hi, everyone. I was waving to the camera. If you're like, who's this guy waving at this nut job up here? We've seen over this past decade an elevated profile in global humanism and our role in it. Literally helping build a better world, if nothing else, just encouraging them to build a better community where they're at. But perhaps the most important thing we've seen over this past decade of all is a shift in community culture, from what I understand. Now, I was in Chicago 6 years ago. I moved here 5.5. A lot of this is what I've been told. But from what I've been told, there's been a huge shift from a congregation of ideas and concepts, high, lofty ideas, meaty ideas and concepts, good, meaty concepts and ideas, and shifting it to where people take priority over ideas. And where, from what I'm told, it feels like so much more of a people-centered, people-driven community. People first. Community first. There's much to look forward to in this next chapter ahead, this next decade. But for now, but for now, we simply support that continuously developing work. How? By simply being. By keeping our eyes focused on what's already right in front of us, without some really cool new leader to come and bring new ideas. No, by us simply being who we are. That doesn't change. Being humanist community together, building a better world, living out a healthier community together. There is much that will be done in the weeks and months ahead. Much work remains for the Board of Trustees, for the coming interim minister, for the eventual search committee. Finding a new minister is just one of many, many things. But make no mistake, folks and family, you are the humanist community that calls itself First Unitarian Society, and you are its future.